as well. So if you'd rather do shrimp fried rice, beef fried rice, whatever you want, any protein option is going to work for you. You could also do plant-based proteins. I know that's something that we talked about in that Game Changers talk. But for today, we're doing chicken fried rice. One of the things with fried rice is it's important to note that it actually works. Oops. Okay. It works best if you use leftover rice. So on Monday, we did a how to cook rice class. I have my leftover rice from that. If you use freshly cooked rice, it'll get kind of gummy. So it just kind of affects the texture of it. If you do find yourself in a pinch and you're really wanting some fried rice, but don't have any rice cooked up, you can cook rice and then even like putting it in the freezer while you work on your other ingredients. That can kind of help get it cooled off a little bit. So the first thing that I'm going to do today, and this is on the recipe that I posted on our Instagram, is we're going to cook the eggs for the fried rice like you would cook eggs in an omelet. So I've got my eggs here. The recipe calls for 3 eggs. So eggs also are going to give us some protein in addition to the chicken that we have in it. So just cracking the eggs into the bowl. Fortunately for me, this was the last of this pack of eggs, so I'm just going to put the shells right back in there. Got to grab a fork. So then just using a fork or a little whisk or whatever it is you might have to kind of break the yolks up and make it more like a scrambled egg. So don't necessarily need to do a super good job, but just kind of want to get it incorporated a little bit. So I'm not going to show you because I think it'll dump out if I do that. But so got it stirred up a little bit. So I'm going to turn my stove on and turn the temperature to like medium or so. It doesn't need to be super hot. If you actually have it really hot, it's going to make it so that it could maybe burn your eggs and just makes them a little bit more rubbery. This is just a nonstick spray to keep the eggs from sticking in the skillet. And then the recipe that's posted, it says to cook the eggs like you would cook an omelet. And so in case you don't know what I mean by that, I'm going to show you. So once I get these eggs poured in, I'm going to pick up my little recording device and I'll hold it over the stove so you can see what I'm doing. But I get those poured in there. And I'm actually going to let that pan heat up a little bit more. So I really like to make really good use of my time while I'm cooking, trying to work on prepping other things while something else is going, just so I save time. Don't necessarily have to do it step by step. So this recipe calls for 2 cloves of garlic. This is a bulb of garlic, so it's the whole thing. Within the bulb, there is cloves. You will likely never find a recipe that calls for an entire bulb. So generally, whatever that number is going to be the number of cloves. So if you just kind of pick at the garlic, they'll come off. There's different layers of like paper around it that comes off too. So I've got my 2 cloves of garlic here. Let's see if that works. Okay. I'm just kind of getting rid of all this extra papery stuff. This paper layer on the garlic, it won't hurt you if you eat it. It's not super easy to chew up and swallow. So you want to try to get most of it off. You can work on just picking it off with your hands. A really easy tip that I have found to do it is if you take your knife and point your knife sharp side away from you. So this is the side that cuts. Sharp side away from you, you can just hit it real hard with your hand and that'll kind of make the paper, the outer layer just peel off of the garlic. So I'm going to do that for this one. And then I'll do that same thing for the second piece. So again, sharp side goes away from me. I've got a fist and I'm just going to smoosh it down. And this one actually had a little bonus baby clove of garlic in it as well. So I've got my 2 cloves of garlic. I can see now that my eggs are ready to do some stuff. So I've got it just flat here in the skillet. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just kind of pull the edges of the side so that the stuff that hasn't been cooked yet is kind of gets out. So you can see there's still some runny parts of that egg. So just kind of working your way around. This actually got cooked up pretty quick. Because ideally we want this egg to be completely cooked, and then we're going to take it off and put it on a plate. And then we will use it, toss it back in at the end. I need both hands for doing this, so I'm quickly realizing. So just picking up the pan and pushing it around on all the different sides so that all the different parts of it get cooked. Once you're done with that, as you can see, that goes real quick. I'm just taking it off the heat and I'm putting it right onto a plate. Easy as that. Done with the egg part of it. So now going back to where we were at, talking about prepping our other vegetables. I've got my 2 garlic cloves here. With garlic, you want to what's called mince it, so chop it up really small. I like to kind of cut it up into some smaller pieces first. So just taking my knife, and you'll notice when I cut, I keep the front of the knife on the cutting board, and it's kind of almost like a rocking motion. So that's where we start at, kind of do nice big slow ones here. But then when we get to really mincing it, so getting it really small, then put your non-dominant hand, so for me that's my left hand, on the front of the knife, and I'm just going to work my way back and forth. So this way you don't have to worry about cutting your fingers or anything, and the pieces are getting smaller and smaller. Kind of regroup them back together, and then same thing, the front of the knife stays down, and just going back and forth until I get those garlic pieces nice and small. I like to prep my vegetables first. This recipe, as I'm cooking it today, has chicken in it. For food safety, you always want to make sure you cut your vegetables before you cut raw meat. So I like to get all of my prep work for all my vegetables done before I cut my meat, or you can use a separate cutting board, that would work too. It's really important. Raw meats can give us a lot of foodborne illnesses if we don't handle them correctly, but once you learn how to cook and make sure that cooking things to safe food temperatures and things like that, you will be able to know that you're going to cook it safely. So as you can see, garlic's nice and small now. The second vegetable, if you will, that we're going to put in this today is an onion. This is just a plain white onion. I'm going to show you the way that I like to cut them. So I like to cut, they usually have kind of like this hairy end, and then, I don't know, this stem end. So I cut the stem side off, and just be real careful here, because when you've got something that's round, it can slip from out underneath you. So I just cut that very top part of it off, and then I put it face down. And so that gave me a flat cutting surface so that this onion is not going to roll around while I'm chopping it. Next thing I do is I try to cut right through the middle of, again, that little hairy stem, and I put my hands on either side of my knife so that hopefully I don't cut myself, and just pushing straight down through the middle there. Similar to garlic, onions kind of got this papery layer on the outside. Just going to use your finger and just kind of work to peel that off. Sometimes they're a little more difficult than others. Again, it's not going to hurt you if you get some of it in your food. It just doesn't taste as good in your mouth if that happens. So I'm going to get the paper off this side of it. Something that's important to know, especially right now with everything with coronavirus, using food safety, making sure you're washing your hands before you're touching any foods that you're going to be eating. So next thing, for the onion, a lot of times you like to have that cut up in smaller pieces too. So the way that I like to cut onions is, now I've got 2 different flat sides that I can cut on. Again, just to make it more stable so that I'm not having something rolling around and might potentially cut myself. So to do this, see if I can get you a better view here, maybe. I'm going to take my knife and I'm going to make cuts all the way down the onion like this, but I'm not actually going to cut through. This guy on the end is going to actually hold it together. So once I go clear across the onion, let me get that done. Again, I've got my hand on either side here so that I'm not really in the risk of getting it cut from the knife. So now that I've got these nice little almost like fringes cut into this onion, gonna put it face side down and then just cut it the other direction. And that's gonna give me nice little pieces of onion. Does anybody have any questions so far on the stuff we've done to this point? All right, that makes it pretty easy. The recipe today is super basic. The great thing about cooking at home is you can kind of customize it to whatever you want to. So if you had vegetables at your house that you wanted to add to this dish, you know, broccoli, bell peppers, eggplant, really whatever, this would be a great time to get those cut up. But today's recipe is just super simple, so you don't even have to worry about that. So I got my garlic and my onion prepped. And I like to just take them off my cutting board and put them on a different clean surface. So I'm just putting them on a plate. Okay, and then the last vegetable that I have to cut today is a green onion. That's what these are. You can eat the whole thing if you want to. Most people tend to kind of just eat the darker green part on top. You'll see they transition to lighter green at the bottom. So these are super easy. You're just gonna put them on your cutting board and work your way down, making small little pieces. Again, that similar technique that I used when I was cutting the garlic, keeping the top of the knife down and almost like seesawing back and forth. All right, so now I have officially gotten all of my vegetables prepped, and I'm gonna switch over to getting my chicken cut. Our recipe calls for chicken sliced into thin strips. I've got just plain chicken breasts today, like you can buy them fresh, you can buy them frozen. Let me run over and grab them. For the sake of this class, I've already done a little bit of the prep work for us, so you don't have to watch me cut as much. So this is my cut chicken bowl. It says I love popcorn. And then this is the cutting board that I use, the separate cutting board for my vegetable cutting board to cut my chicken on. So you can, again, like the cool thing about cooking at home is you can really customize it to how you like it. So if you like bigger pieces of meat, if you like smaller pieces of meat, that's really your call. And sticking with the recipe, I pretty much did it in strips. So just taking my knife and cutting right across here. This is a nice sharp knife. Sometimes you have to do a little more sawing than that. But you'll see, thought I cut all the way through it. Nice long strips, and I'm probably gonna cut these into about thirds just because even though I don't necessarily mind if they're not small pieces, that would be a very large piece of chicken to encounter in a bowl of fried rice. So again, gonna add this to my chicken bowl. I'm gonna do the same thing with these remaining two. Going back to customizing it with vegetables that you might like to put in this, another great option when you're cooking, and especially for recipes like this that you're probably going to be using on nights when you're pinched for time. Frozen vegetables, keep in a bag of, frozen broccoli, frozen stir-fry vegetables. Peas and carrots is a super common one that you might see in a fried rice recipe. Those are all super easy because all you'll have to do is open up the bag and then dump them in. Because I've been touching raw meat, I'm going to go wash my hands real quick, so that way I don't get these raw meat germs anywhere else in the kitchen. Okay, and then the recipe says to toss the chicken that we've cut up with a little bit of sesame oil and salt and pepper in the bowl. So I've got this sesame oil here. Certainly if you don't have sesame oil, you can make this and not use it. Sesame oil has a very distinct taste. I think it adds a lot of really good flavor to dishes, but if you don't have it, you don't necessarily need it. You can get it at Walmart. Honestly, I've bought in sesame oil a lot of times at TJ Maxx. So there's lots of different ways that you can get it, but you don't have to have it if you don't have it. You can just use canola oil. But I'm just going to put a little bit of sesame oil in there and then some salt and pepper to help give this chicken some flavor. And we are so close to getting cooking here. So I'm actually going to use a different pan than the one that I used for the eggs, just because I want a pan that's a little bit bigger, has a little bit higher edges to it. But if you only have one pan at home, one pan is fine. I personally, when I cook, tend to make a lot of messes, so I try to err on the side of the pan being too big than the pan being too small, just to hopefully fit most of the stuff that I'm cooking. But again, if you only have one pan, that size will work fine. So just got the stove turned on there. I'm going to put a little bit of oil into the pan. And this is where it all starts to come together real quick. Let's see. I can flip this. Ooh. Maybe I can't flip this. Oh, yes, I can. So I'm going to flip this so you guys can actually get a better view of what it is that I'm cooking. So we've got the oil heating in the pan. I'm just kind of trying to push it around a little bit, spread it around. And the recipe says to add the chicken to the skillet first and cook it till it's lightly golden, which should only really take a couple minutes. You want to let your pan get heated up so that pretty much as soon as you add the chicken, it's going to start sizzling. So just kind of push it around a little bit. This might even be a little bit much chicken for this pan. You want to try to be careful to not, it's called overcrowding your skillet, meaning you don't necessarily want to have like a whole layer of chicken clear across the bottom. You want to make sure it's getting plenty of heat. So I'll just have to be mindful of making sure that I get this chicken kind of turned over on itself. Another thing about fried rice is obviously we're using rice today, but you can make it with lots of different grains. You could make, you know, barley, or if you had white rice or brown rice, or really whatever you've got. This recipe is really versatile. And also it can be customized to kind of meet your goals as an athlete and your needs. So, you know, most of us are at home and not training as hard right now as we would be if we were in season on campus. And so we have to adjust what we're eating to match that. So we use plates, and we say, you know, having about half of your plate being color, a quarter of your plate being carbs, and a quarter of your plate being protein. So for this recipe, it doesn't really have color in it. We've got some onions and stuff. But if I'm making this for dinner, I would definitely have a salad on the side. But for our carbs, we've got rice. And then for our protein, we're going to have eggs and chicken in it. But even if you are at home and you're still training really hard, really had hard workouts, you can certainly scale that up. So have relatively more rice compared to the amount of chicken that you have. If you're trying to eat lighter, you could add a whole bunch of cooked vegetables to this and do less rice. So it really can be customized to whatever your needs might be.
But for most of us right now, we should be looking at, you know, anywhere from 1/2 to 1/3 of what we're eating to be what we call color, so fruits and vegetables. I'll switch it back around. Let you see this chicken's kind of starting to get cooked here. And so you'll see that it's starting to get white on some of the pieces, and it's not necessarily pink like it was when we first put it in. So just keep pushing that. Since this is more than I really probably should have put in this pan, I'm going to give it a little more than 2 minutes before I continue on the recipe. So there's like chat available online, or if you want to just say it out loud. Has anybody here cooked fried rice before ever at home on their own?
If I make fried rice, like I kind of just throw in whatever is left over in the fridge, so it's not like really traditional fried rice. Yeah.
That's a great way to do it though, because you know, like I was saying, one of the things about cooking at home is it's so versatile. You know, like you said, whatever's left over in the fridge, if you had some mushrooms from stroganoff you'd already made, or whatever the case might be, you can always use that stuff in it. So that's a great way to kind of clean up the fridge and get rid of some stuff.
For sure, yeah.
All right, so I'd say we're pretty good there. So now I'm going to add the onions and the garlic. Once you add these, they add a real good smell. Kind of tastes like home cooking. So again, just kind of pushing it around. The goal with these is just to get them nice and soft. So onion, as you saw when I cut it, it's pretty crunchy at first. Once it gets heated up though, it's gonna take on a much smoother or softer texture. And so we'll just kind of let that sit for now and let those vegetables start to soften. And then we're gonna move back to the eggs. So that little egg omelet pancake thing we made at the beginning, we're gonna bring back out. Find a way to balance the screen. So here it is on the plate that I had put out. Grab my knife, my vegetable knife. So it's okay to use on foods that we plan to eat. I wouldn't want to use my raw chicken knife here. And just kind of cutting this up into smaller size pieces that you'd want to see in some fried rice. I like this method better. Sometimes you'll see recipes online that say, you know, to add the egg at the very end. Personally, when I've been cooking, I have not had much success doing it that way. I feel like it kind of makes the eggs turn, I don't know, slimy or like disintegrate. You don't really get good chunks of eggs. So I really like doing it this way and adding the kind of pre-cooked egg chunks back in at the end. So just stirring this around here, helping those onions get moved into the heat and get cooked. Come back and do a little bit more cutting of these eggs. All right, so got that done. Make sure these are all fully separated. All right, and we are just about getting to the end of this here. So the recipe says to add the garlic and onion, cook for about 4 more minutes, or cook it from 4 minutes from when you added it. And so we're getting close to that. Honestly, when you're cooking at home, you know, it's great to have those times as you're just learning, but the more you cook, the more you'll just kind of start to use the cooking cues to know when your stuff is done. So when you add onions or any vegetables, really,
you're just wanting to make sure that they're as soft as you would want them to be when you're eating them. So if you're cool eating crispy onions or crunchy onions in your fried rice, that's great. If you really prefer to have it cooked softer, you can keep it in there a little bit longer and have it cooked softer. But I can tell just by looking at these, they're starting to get pretty translucent. So I think they're just about where I want them to be. The next steps of this is going to be, oh, okay. I was like, I don't think the recipe says to add the rice, but it does. So the next step of this is going to be to add the rice and then to add the green onions into it. So again, I've got my cold leftover rice that I've had in the fridge since we cooked it on Monday. And got my measuring cup. The recipe calls for 4 cups of rice, but you can totally customize this based off your fueling needs. So I'm gonna go 1, 2, 4. And then I'm also going to add in my green onions. They're these guys that we cut up at the beginning. I'm just gonna stir it all around to really incorporate it well. Get that rice heated through and kind of picking up some of that flavor from the garlic and the onions. The rice that I cooked on Monday, because it was the rice that I had on hand, was brown rice, as I talked about in that cooking class. Brown rice takes a lot longer than white rice does, but it's what we had at home, and trying not to go to the grocery store all the time, figured I would make it work. So again, just stirring this around real good to help kind of fry up that rice a little bit, get all those flavors incorporated into this. And once I get done with this here, the last things I have to do is I'm just going to take it off the stove. I'm going to season it with soy sauce and put my eggs in. Definitely, if you have other seasonings, spices, whatever, personally, I like my food spicy. So when I eat this, I'll probably add some red pepper flakes to mine. But spice is definitely not for everyone. So you can add it as you please. I'd say we're pretty good here. So I'm going to turn the heat off. And then I'm going to add my soy sauce, which you can eyeball this. The recipe calls for 2 tablespoons, but you can also eyeball it. And certainly you can season to taste. One of my biggest guidelines is always add less than you think you'll need, because you can add more, you can't ever take less. So, you know, and that goes for everything, not just soy sauce, but, you know, adding milk in smoothies. I always try to err on the side of not enough, because it's really easy to add more milk. It's really hard to have added too much milk and wish that you hadn't. So, so just, yeah, and kind of play it by ear. Because I actually feel like this looks like maybe I want a little bit more in here, because I did have quite a bit of chicken. So I'm going to add probably 1 more spoonful. And then last but not least, we're just going to top the egg in there. So you guys saw how, you know, pretty easy that was to come together. I think we started cooking less than 30 minutes ago, and surely if I wasn't trying to do awkward camera stuff at the same time, it probably could have come together even a little bit faster. But we are done making fried rice. I'll show you what it looks like. And so that is ready to eat. Does anybody have any questions about how we did this, cooking fried rice in the future, or anything like that?
No, I think that looks good. I wish I was in your house and could smell that right now. I feel that smells so good with the sesame oil and the garlic.
Yeah, it smells really good. This is my dinner tonight, so I'm looking.
We all excited for you.
Anybody else have any questions or anything else they might want to add? All right, well, thanks everyone. On Friday, I'm making French toast, and it'll have like a fruit and nut topping. So if you're looking for some quick, easy breakfast ideas, Fridays will be your go-to. They're going to be Zoom classes just like this one. I'll continue to post the link on Instagram. Yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day, whether it's today or tomorrow, Renee, and spending some time with me.
Yeah,
Thank you,
so
Shay.
much.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.